Good morning and welcome to Stroke, the Journey of Things podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Amla. I created this podcast to reach out to us as a community and bring us all together. Today, we're going to be talking about stroke survivor depression and stroke survivor suicide. Topics I think are really important for us to talk about. I'm going to introduce you to a clinical mental health coach, a clinical mental health person named Alan Simberg, and he is going to help shed a light on depression and suicide. We're going to talk about that, so let's get into it. Well, good morning, Alan.
Good morning, Aaron.
Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Well, I appreciate being a guest on your show.
Really, people don't know this, but we ran into each other in a roundabout way, and you become a vital asset to me. So thank you so much. Appreciate that. But let's get right into it, Alan. Let's go right into what is depression.
Well, one of the things that I would like to make clear to your listening audience is that the term depression, from a clinical point of view, includes several symptoms. And basically, there's a diagnostic statistical manual that lists like how many of each of these symptoms you have to have in order to be considered clinically depressed. Now, sometimes people will say to me, I'm depressed. And I'll say, well, what do you mean? How do you know that you're depressed? And they'll say, well, sometimes I'm sad. That's not depression. That's sadness. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to go over the major symptoms of depression. So the first one is little interest or pleasure in doing things that you ordinarily would enjoy doing. That's really important. And one of the reasons why that's one of the symptoms of depression is when someone is clinically depressed, they kind of withdraw. They go into themselves. They also, the technical term is isolate. Basically, what that means is they stop interacting with people. Okay, so that's one. Now, if that's you, that doesn't mean you're depressed. That's just one symptom. Okay. Another symptom is feeling down or hopeless or helpless. That's a significant symptom of depression. When you're feeling down or hopeless or helpless, it contributes to you not having the energy or motivation to doing what you need to do to get better and feel better. Another symptom is trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or sleeping too much. Now, if you're a parent with a 5-month-old baby, you're not going to be sleeping much. That doesn't mean that's a symptom of depression. Okay. And the reason I say that is I have clients say to me, I'm having big trouble sleeping. And then I'm wise enough and experienced enough to say, well, what's causing you to not be able to sleep? They say, well, my baby wakes me up. I say, okay, well, that's not an answer to this question. I understand. And maybe we could talk about that after we go through all these symptoms, but that's not a symptom. That's not a symptom of depression for you. And then poor appetite or overeating. So in other words, eating very little or eating much more than you ordinarily would. Okay, so when you're depressed from a clinical point of view, you either lose your appetite or you tend to eat a bunch of junk to help you to feel better.
Self-medicating, right?
Yes, yes. Self-medicating with food or not self-medicating by not eating. And then also feeling bad about yourself that you're a failure or you've let yourself or your family down. Now, that in and of itself doesn't mean you're depressed, but when it's in with all these other symptoms, that's part of clinical depression. Another part is trouble concentrating on doing things like reading the newspaper, watching television, or reading a book. If you just find that you're having a lot of trouble focusing and concentrating, and usually you're thinking about things that have you very sad during those times. Other thing that may happen then is you may just have such scatteredness. But remember, that symptom in and of itself is not depression because people that have the diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder also have trouble focusing. So it has to be within the context of all those symptoms. And then the next one, and this is next to the last, the next one is moving so slowly that other people much slower than what you're used to. You're dragging yourself, or being so fidgety and restless that other people have noticed. And then this last symptom is really the hallmark of clinical depression. It's not thinking that life is worth living, seriously considering that maybe you do want to hurt yourself. So that's basically what depression is. Now, one last thing I want to say about depression is that depression is about anger that you're experiencing in the present about the past. So,
Repeat that. Repeat that. Repeat that, Alan.
okay, depression is about anger that you're feeling in the present about something or some things that were unresolved for you in the past. So I'll give an example. So one example would be if you've gotten a stroke, maybe you'll be angry that you didn't do certain things or you did do certain things in the past that maybe could have been helpful. And that would, because the thought would be, oh, I'm so stupid. I'm such a dummy. I can't believe, if I didn't do that, let's say drink. Okay. Let's say maybe you drank a lot, or maybe you only drank a little bit. But in your mind, and this could be the case, obviously, with alcohol, in your mind, that contributed to your stroke. Well, then you could get down on yourself thinking like, oh, if I only didn't drink or I didn't drink so much, maybe I wouldn't have had a stroke. That's possible, but it's not 100% guaranteed. Maybe in your case, the drinking didn't have anything to do with stroke. There were other things that contributed to it. So one of the keys there is to be able to forgive yourself for what you've done or haven't done in the past. Forgive yourself means let it go. Do your best not to focus on it. Focus on what you need to do to have the best life possible from wherever you are at the moment.
That's really helpful, Alan. The biggest thing in my community, the stroke survivor community, is depression. I went through it, but I'm realizing it's funny as I went back, and of those 5 stages of grief, I don't think I grieved my stroke properly because it constantly pops up, things pop up that tell me I've not addressed the grief. So you and I will talk about that later. But the main thing is I went through this depression, and there are many as you can imagine, stroke strips you of everything, pretty much.
Yeah.
And it leaves you tattered and depressed. So, knowing the signs, a lot of you out there may think you have neural fatigue, but in reality, you have maybe some of these symptoms of depression. Because neural fatigue is very similar to depression. But if you just heard Alan, go back and listen to what Alan said. There are very clear signs of depression. And you need to do that. Now, I'm curious, Alan, what you feel? Let's say, okay, I've examined myself. I now think I had depression. What are some strategies I can do as a stroke survivor to overcome the depression?
Well, I'm going to give you the foundation of what needs to be done, and then I'm going to give the detail. The foundation is not to allow yourself to be inactive for an excessive amount of time. You need your rest, obviously. We all need our rest for different reasons. If you've had a stroke, you might need more rest than what you ordinarily would have needed before you had the stroke. So, one of the ways to take action is to seek out any professional that could help you in your situation. For some people, it might be physical therapy. For some people, it might just be psychological help. Maybe a person knows what to do physically. Maybe it's getting the physical therapy, but seeking it, and also seeking the psychological help. Now, some people prefer to meet with a therapist or a professional, could be a coach also, individually. Some people prefer to meet in a group. One of the things that I think is a very big help for stroke survivors is the fact that meetings can now be virtual, because obviously getting around, being physically mobile can be difficult for some people. So, no, I really can't go and meet somebody. You don't have to worry about that anymore. And that doesn't have to stop you. It's really important, and I don't know what the percentages might be, but it's really important that you do not concern yourself with what someone's going to think about you because you had a stroke. Don't let that stop you from finding out where you can get the help. And again, don't let your depression stop you. Don't give up. Don't let the depression defeat you.
I gotta say this. You are making it clear. We actually have a decision. We actually could say, okay, I'm not gonna give in to, because I've always heard the saying, where you focus, your energy will flow where your focus goes. And
Yeah.
that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. Is it okay if I tell a quick story?
Yeah, please.
Okay. I'm going to tell a story to demonstrate what I just said. I used to run a group in an inpatient drug and alcohol program, and there was one client in there who was severely depressed. Every time the group would end, he would immediately go to bed, and he would stay in bed until the next activity.
Wow.
One day during the group, I asked him if, when the group ended, this is an example of taking action. I asked him if he would be willing to be the first one to leave the group and to hold the door open for everyone else, and
Oh,
then leave,
wow.
and then leave when the last person has left the room. He agreed to do that. He did it. While he was standing at the door, as people were leaving the room, some of them thanked him. Thank you for holding the door. He started to smile. He always had this is the look he always had on his face.
Just,
When he was holding that door, he went like,
huh.
like almost like he was forcing a smile. When the last person left the room and he let the door close, I had to do some notes in the room. I looked outside. There was a glass door. I looked outside the door. He was walking around the unit. That's the first time he didn't go to bed immediately after the group.
Right.
And he was acknowledging, he was like nodding as people passed by. That was his first step.
That actually is very powerful, bro. Very powerful.
Yeah.
Really powerful. That is amazing. So really, it kind of goes in line with what I just shared, what you just said. Don't focus on what you can't do. Focus on what you can. You can something as simple as holding a door to change that man's life.
And the most important thing is don't let the amount of effort that you have to put forth to do something stop you, because inactivity contributes to ongoing depression. Action helps to get past it.
Wow, that's big. That's big. People, you need to listen to that. Don't. What is to do? Makes you withdraw. Makes you recluse. Makes you turn inward. And you've heard of Alan right here. If you suffer from depression, you suffer from negative thoughts, action is the answer. Because any of the Alan, I can't but think love is an action, not a word. It's not a noun, it's an action.
Yeah. And it's not only loving anybody else, it's also loving yourself.
True. And if you're feeling all depressed, love yourself. Offer yourself grace, mercy, patience. Alan, and now this one thing sidetrack. You're only able to be a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist or whatever in what state?
In Texas and New Jersey.
Okay, 2 states, Texas, Texas and New Jersey out there listening. You can meet with Alan personally, and I'll put it
virtually.
I'll meet with Alan virtually. I'll put his contact information in the description of this video. I'm curious. We're going to touch on suicide a little bit. I personally went through. I had in my younger days, went through a lot, and seriously contemplated suicide a couple of times, where I thought for sure I was going to end my life in my younger days before my stroke. And then, I realized when I had my stroke, recently in the last 15 years, I began to think in my mind, oh, my life is over. I can't do anything anymore. I'm useless. I'm worthless. I'm nothing but a burden. And I contemplated suicide very seriously after my stroke. So I can relate to that. When does depression, or feeling sad, or feeling lonely, isolated, what caused that person to cross over the line from depression to suicidal thoughts? I mean, what do I watch out for?
Well, there's two primary things that contribute to that. One is if a person either starts eating very little or only eats a lot of junk. Good, healthy, nutritious food helps to combat depression.
All right, I'm going to pause for a minute. Good, healthy, nutritious food helps fight depression, people. Every Friday, Stroke TV Media puts out is working in combination with Dr. Talent, and he's a nutrition doctor. He actually is a cardiologist and does cardiac surgery and stuff. But he really has found nutrition is everything. The way you eat directly affects the way you feel. And that's what you're saying.
Yeah, because what I'm not saying, which I will say now based on what you said, is that depression one of the major, if not the major contributing factor, is a chemical imbalance. So if you either don't eat a reasonable amount of food and you don't eat a very reasonable amount of healthy food, your blood sugar goes down, your cortisol, which is the stress hormone, goes up, and that contributes to depression.
Well, that is huge. And people just, Alan, what I'm going to do in the future, in this coming up year, 2025, is really, really hit nutrition hard, because I'm finding this recently, probably the last 4 months since I met this Dr. Sal, I realized nutrition is vital for all of us to stroke the virus. Proper nutrition, proper eating. So what other someone looked at? Let's do this. What are some of the signs you're watching more about the travel over from depression to suicide? What do I watch out for?
Well, I think this is a little bit tricky, but this is what needs to be watched out for. If you notice yourself being hopeless, oh, my life's over. What's the use? It's such a struggle. Even getting out of bed is a struggle. I'm right-handed now. I can only use my left hand. Oh, why did this happen to me? Oh, poor me. All the kinds of things that you would think to bring yourself down, and then also feeling helpless. There's no way that I can do anything to make this any better. This happened to me. There's nothing I can do to improve it. Those are the two major. It's the way you think. The way you think leads to suicide. And those are the two main ways: hopeless and helpless. Because if you have no hope and you don't think there's any way that you could either help yourself and or get help from other people, seriously, what's the use of living?
Wow.
That's the crossover part. And then this is something to be very careful of. If anyone themselves or anyone knows someone who starts to give away things that they would not ordinarily give away, their personal possessions, that person is preparing to die.
Wow. I see. I can understand that. I didn't know that.
Yeah. Now, if the person is going to be moving and they want to downsize, that's different. But as I mentioned earlier, if you see these different symptoms and that's part of the symptoms, that's a real serious point. That's not going to be a year or two away. That's going to be real soon. And also, if someone is a gun owner, it doesn't mean they're going to commit suicide. But if the person seriously thinks about suicide, that would be one way they do it. Also, depending on either the medications or the kind of medications they're taking, what some people will do, if they're planning to commit suicide, they'll store up, they'll get as much medication as possible so they can overdose.
I gotta say something. The bottom line is, if we can change the way we think, we can change this whole roller coaster of depression and suicide, right? We can change the way we think. So what would be some of those changes that we do? What changes will we do?
Well, one of the changes is what you mentioned earlier. Do your best. I'm just going to say what you said a little bit differently. Do your best to think as little as possible about what's not okay and put your attention on what you want to be okay and put in the effort to find out how you can improve your life as much as possible.
Well, okay, I was spoken like a clinician. Basically, don't focus on the negatives of your life. Focus on what we can do. Your stroke, Alan, it takes away a lot. It takes away pretty much everything you thought you were. And most of my community out there left hanging. Who am I? But I'll put a link to this prior podcast I did where your identity is after stroke because it changes you. But Alan, it is probably the most basic yet not easy to do sometimes to focus on the things you can do because my brain always wants to focus on what it can't do.
See, but here's the thing, and you just said it, Aaron.
Okay.
Here's the thing that's most important. When I say you, I mean anybody, not just anybody in particular. When you identify with the stroke, you identify your identity as the stroke. That's not helpful at all. Your identity, I'm going to say this real slow. Your identity is not your stroke. Your stroke is something that happened to you. If you identify your identity as being the stroke, what are you going to do? That's you. That's your identity. If you're a man and you identify as a man, the only thing you could do is get an operation to maybe change it.
Right.
So your identity is not your stroke.
It's funny, Alan. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but there's something very profound a person said to me, and she is the CEO of Stroke Warriors, I think. Stroke is what happened to you. We can do nothing about that. But what we can do is how we respond. That is our identity, is how we respond to what happened to us.
Yeah. How we respond as who we truly are. A spirit having a human experience.
Oh, great. So, Alan, I can't believe it. It's really about the time. But I do want to, I want to ask Alan, what word would you give some of the strokers going through a stroke and they're finding themselves depressed or suicidal? What is it there, like an 811 number to call when you're suicidal?
Well, usually each county has like a mental health hotline. So that would be one thing. If you happen to have health insurance, insurance companies have lists of therapists. Those are the only two things that I'm aware of that I could suggest. There may be others. There may be like stroke helpline. I don't know about any of those specific things.
I bet tell you what, for me, Alan, as a stroke survivor, I lost a lot of my physical abilities, my identity. Is that I shifted my focus. And I shifted away from the negative things I couldn't do and began to focus on what I could do. And that really was a game changer, life changer for me. It took me out of the depression, was that I began to think of how could I help people? How could I work with people like you? How could I help my fellow? The reason I started this podcast was to bring our community together that feels so isolated, so alone.
Yes,
that changed everything. So,
yeah.
It really did. So, Alan, how do people get a hold of you if they want? Can they talk to you outside the state, or if they live in the state, you're in New Jersey and what was it?
Texas.
if they live in New Jersey or Texas, what is your email? They want to email you. How do they email you?
Well, the email is alan@alansimberg.com. And my phone number is 281-785-0660. I'll say that part again.
And they,
281-785-0660.
perfect. And that is people. If you live, I've known Alan for a while, definitely for a while, and I'm telling you, a man that cares. I don't know, I haven't seen therapists, but Alan has been kind of a good brother and a really good friend of mine. And I look forward to talking to him more, but definitely take him up. If you're in New Jersey or Texas, email him, reach out to him, he'll help you for sure. Alan, we're out of time. I can't believe it. Half an hour went by. We'll be doing more of these segments, more education, more. My podcast, I want to be of value to people, to churchgoers. Alan, what you gave us today was valuable. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for having me as a guest on your podcast and allowing me to be of service to your listening audience.
Man, I cry easy. So thank you, Alan, for being there. Appreciate it a lot. I really do.
It
Appreciate
was
it.
my pleasure for
All
sure.
right. Have a great day, Alan.
Thank you too, Aaron.
Okay.